The sword. A flat length of steel sharpened to cut, a weapon of envy and glory, of hatred and honor, a tool, a symbol, a razor's edge with which fates are written in blood and ichor. The bear and the dragon duel for Skyrim, but which blade shall prevail? Whose weapon shall become legend and have its name cut into the annals of history? The swords of Skyrim are storied, with many a secret tale attached to their legend. And some are far weirder than you think. It's been 14 years since Skyrim released, so we are all accustomed to waiting. So just before we dive into the secret sword lore, I want to give a thank you to the sponsor of this video, Opera GX. Opera GX is on a quest to help gamers break up with boring browsers. Those browsers are bland and uninspiring, like starting a new playthrough with no backstory, role-playing plans, or even a name for your character. But with Opera GX, you'll be able to craft your own experience with the power of deep customization brought to you by the mods in the GX store. Create a one-of-a-kind experience, be it a fantasy atmosphere or any other vibe you like, as you choose between animated wallpapers, background music, keyboard sounds, opening and closing tab sounds, customized splash screens for when you open the browser, custom GX logos, various fonts, custom UI icons like these awesome Witcher ones, and shaders that change your entire screen, like this Cyberdeck one if you want to feel like a Netrunner or a cyborg Pelennor Whitestrake. With Opera GX, the watching never stops. Their video pop-out button lets you stay immersed in your favorite worlds as you travel between socials, email or work tasks, or searching for the source behind the deep lore you just discovered. You can hide your IP to protect your privacy and access content from different regions by turning on their free VPN in your settings, and if you click here and use code EGGPLANT, you can get 1 month of the VPN Pro version for free. This protects up to 6 devices with next-gen VPN encryption and access to over 3,000 private servers in over 30 countries. Go from zero to hero in a matter of seconds with the import tool, bringing across all your settings from your previous browser, like your bookmarks and history, while retaining compatibility with Chrome extensions. Use our link below to download Opera GX today and experience the best browser. Throughout the histories of the Elder Scrolls, there have been many a sword and sword wielder that have carved their names into legend and folklore, and in their passing, treasure hunters and heroes have sought these storied weapons as instruments of their own glory. This, of course, would apply to the last Dragonborn. If all tales are to be believed, they are a most avid collector. Let us follow in their path and reveal the secrets of these artifacts. First, we have a blade that has spilled more blood than most, a weapon of pure vengeance, the sword of the unbowed, a symbol of resistance, the razor talon of the Red Eagle. Have you heard the tale of Phelan, the Diamond's Doom, an ancient king of the Reach who wiped scores of men from the face of Nirn in defense of his beloved home? Shrieking eagles cried his name as he rose from mother's womb, a child born with the blood elk's eye, whose rage spelled Diamond's doom. Despair, despair, as Hestra came, southborn hag of Whitestone Tower. With bands of iron spears and shields, she turned the king hearts black and sour. Phelan gathered those who were unyielding, those sons and daughters of the Reach who clung to the old ways and yearned for freedom. In the nights they fell upon occupiers and traitors alike. Imperial patrols and garrisons were massacred, but for each that was vanished, another would take their place, marching from the verdant south. At last he traded his eagle's heart to the ravens who covet our power. In his breast they planted the briar seed that grows from the corpse's flower. Thousands fell to his flaming sword as the blood sun rose and set. Despite the bite of 100 arrows, he fought till death he met. Let all remember Phelan's rage, for it dwells in the heart of us all. Any who covet the sacred reach will suffer our spears and fall. Red Eagle's song poetically describes his furious defiance of imperial occupation and his legendary battle as a Briarheart, a spirit of vengeance, pitiless and beyond remorse. For millennia, his tragic last stand has been remembered by the Reachfolk, his final fight in which he slew over 1,000 foreigners with his flaming sword. The Vaetishrans say no ring or steel could turn his blade. In Skyrim, you can take yourself upon pursuit of this blade, fighting your way through Red Eagle Redoubt and slaying the forsworn leader at the top of the Sundered Towers who is in possession of the weapon. We read the Red Eagle's right, and our quest for knowledge leads us to the Rebel's Cairn, and on our little journey we actually have to face down Red Eagle himself, who suspiciously looks exactly like a Dragalord. Red Eagle's Fury itself is an ancient Nordic sword in the vanilla game. Here I have the unique Uniques mod on just to give it a bit more of a distinct identity, but in general, the idea that a Reachman could have claimed a sword of an ancient Nordic warrior and taken it as his own, and even passed this trophy down generations, is quite plausible. This isn't the difficult part to grapple with. Rebel's Cairn is the location in which we can find the undead Phelan and raise him with the call of his blade, yet the structure of the tomb is distinctly Nordic in design, and there is the fact that Phelan himself is entombed in the Nordic tradition and is wearing ancient Nordic armor. Surely he should be wearing a more distinctly Reachman attire and buried in their way. There are a few possible explanations here, and first and most probable is that whomever designed this ruin didn't properly think out how it appears incongruent with the Reachman lore. However, there are some interesting ideas we could propose that may explain this. The Reach has had cultural exchange with the ancient Nords for quite some time, since before recorded history even. In fact, the Reach folk are said to be a mongrel race of Nedic, Breton, Nordic, Elven, and some even say Orcish and Daedric ancestry. The Reach has long been a melting pot of invaders, natives, and occupiers, which has surely affected the characteristics of their race and culture to some extent throughout the eras. To zero in on the Nordic influence specifically, we must look to the fact that throughout the Reach there are many ancient Nordic ruins and the seats of dragon priests even, implying that the native Reachmen would have been variously conquered by and exposed to Nordic culture even as far back as the heyday of the dragon cult. Perhaps this is why at this point in history Phelan was buried in ancient Nordic fashion, a tradition culturally shared by the ancient Reachmen perhaps. But potentially there is even a more duplicitous reason, perhaps fearing that the burial of Red Eagle would be disturbed or defaced by imperial occupiers. Red Eagle was buried in an already existing ancient Nordic tomb, disguised as if he were some ancient Nordic lord, thereby preventing its attempted desecration. Either way, we face down Red Eagle and bring him to his final rest, and in the pedestal in which we placed Red Eagle's Fury to enter this tomb, we now witness its transformation into Red Eagle's Bane, a transformed version of the sword with strikes that send undead fleeing in terror while set alight. While we are adventuring in the Reach, we face many Forsworn inhabiting the ancient Nordic ruins, but amongst all there stands out a unique structure of a much later time. Skyhaven Temple stands, shrouded in the clouds, locked for all without the dragon blood. It is one of the few examples of Akaviri architecture left on Tamriel, an ancient temple of the Dragon Guard, the Akaviri invaders who bent the knee to Riemann and declared him emperor. These Akaviri, more specifically Sayesi, the Serpent Folk, became valuable warriors and advisors of the Riemann dynasty, with the Dragon Guard being the elite, but they did disband after their disgrace being unable to prevent the assassination of Riemann III and his son Prince Juliak. Splinter factions of the Dragon Guard would generations later reform into the Blades, the Imperial Intelligence Service of the Septim Dynasty and the Third Empire. They retained the Akaviri stylings of architecture, armor, and arms, notoriously the Akaviri katana. These weapons were plentiful among the Dragon Guard and their successors in the Blades, but there were several that were leagues above the rest. Examples such as the blade Northwind of Ice-Cold Edge, and Mixashi's Cleaver, whose touch could make even the finest armors crumble to rust. But here in Skyrim, we with the blood of the dragon can enter Skyhaven Temple and find a sword most antique. This is Dragonbane, an Akaviri katana that crackles with lightning, specifically designed for the felling of dragons, a beautiful craft as if it was made by Ilni herself, the Sayesi deity of air and weather. You see, the Akaviri Dragon Guard at the time of Riemann were specialized dragon hunters who, in addition to being the protectors and servants of the Riemann dynasty, were dedicated to the elimination of all the winged lizards that still lurked hidden corners of Tamriel. In Skyhaven Temple itself, there is the Atlas of Dragons, which compiles a list of known dragons living and dead, including the 14 slain by the Dragon Guard themselves. For some additional context, Akavir, from where the Dragon Guard come, means Dragonland, and the book Mysterious Akavir explains in part the animosity that the Sayesi have for dragonkind. Sayesi is Snake Palace, once the strongest power in Akavir before the Tiger Dragon came. The serpent folk ate all the men of Akavir a long time ago, but still kind of look like them. They are tall, beautiful, if frightening, covered in golden scales, and immortal. Kapotun is the Tiger Dragon's empire. The catfolk here are ruled by the divine Toshraka, the Tiger Dragon. They are now a very great empire, stronger than Sayesi, though not at sea. After the serpent folk ate all the men, they tried to eat all the dragons. They managed to enslave the red dragons, but the black ones had fled to then Potun. A great war was raged, which left both the cats and the snakes weak, and the dragons all dead. Since that time, the catfolk have tried to become the dragons. Toshraka is the first to succeed. He is the largest dragon in the world, orange and black, and he has very many new ideas. Clearly, the Sayesi have a well-established hatred of dragons, and so it makes all the more sense as to why they would pledge themselves to Riemann, a dragonborn, an individual with the ability to absorb the souls of dragons and truly kill them. The Sayesi are a truly fascinating race of Akavir. They've had so much cultural impact on the Empire, and traces of their blood are still found in imperial lineages of today. But we have a strange lack of clarity on what they even looked like. Serpentine with golden scales, shapeshifters, vampiric entities. We won't get to the bottom of this question anytime soon, but their legacy in weaponry is not only found in the Tanto, Wakizashi, and Katana styles, but also these curiously strange and ornate Blood Drinker swords. In the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, the Shivering Isles DLC, you may encounter the marvelous weapon which changes with day and night, Dawnfang and Duskfang. These names were not its original. They were given by the orc Gromok Grobarak, who had recovered this blade as plunder in his adventuring. Dawnfang, the daylight form, imbues the blade strikes with fire and health absorption, whereas Duskfang, the night form, bears a frigid frostbite and the leeching of magicka. The sword is a rather sinister creation, echoing the legendary traits of the Sayesi, with golden serpentine details and powers which grow with the blood it drinks. Throughout the centuries since Gromok, his magical sword has changed hands several times, eventually falling into the hands of an infamous blade captain, Laurent Bouchard, who was even rumoured to have been part Sayesi himself. Driven to darkness by the death of his wife and the bloodthirsty influence of the sword, madness overtook. A necromancer named Seychelle Gatharian plotted to take this sword from Laurent with a convoluted plan involving swapping it with Bloodthirst, another Sayesi blood drinker blade which absorbs the life force of those it strikes. Another known blood drinker blade is known as Rhymelink, a sword with a blizzard's bite. Each of these Sayesi blood drinker swords bear these coloured stones in their hilt, each alluding to the properties of the blade. They are such beautiful and fantastical weapons, steel mouths grooved with teeth to drink in the blood of their enemies, both vampiric and serpentine like their mysterious creators. I personally love the vampiric shapeshifter type theories about the Sayesi, with the idea that they were more literally serpent-like, as is described in the books Mysterious Akavir and 2920 Last Year of the First Era. I love the idea that they can take on the power or forms of the things that they consume. Remember, they were said to have eaten all the men of Akavir, and hence, maybe that is why they can take on more human-like forms. Imagining the Sayesi as these shape-shifting, immortal vampiric beings is really cool, and thematically, it matches the properties of these blood drinker swords. Interestingly, the vampire Harkon, Lord of the Volkihar, possesses a vampiric blade in the Akaviri style, one which only functions properly in the hands of a vampire, absorbing health, magicka, and stamina. Perhaps this was especially made for him by some Sayesi smith during the reign of Riemann, or perhaps it was the sword of a dragon guard who was killed by Harkon, then claimed and corrupted by the pure blood of Molag Bal. We can only really speculate, but if you do choose to become a vampire and slay Harkon, you can take this weapon to use as your own. There are other katanas of note, such as Bolar's Oathblade, the Akaviri katana of Achilles Bolar, the last of the blades who had survived the fall of Cloud Ruler Temple. To he who finds this, know that I, Achilles Bolar, last of the blades to survive the attack on Cloud Ruler Temple, took refuge here, in this ancient sanctuary. The Thalmor have come for me, but they shall not desecrate this place. I go forth to meet my death with honour. If you are worthy, take up my blade and do the same. The weapon itself, if you desire to take up the cause against the Thalmor, is found in Bloated Man's Grotto by a statue of Talos. It causes fear and damages an enemy's stamina, a nice early game sword. But Akaviri Dragon Guard and blades aside, it seems that it is not only mortals who so love the craft of a katana. The Daedric princes are known for their gifts, the coveted Daedric artifacts. Goldbrand is one such legendary weapon, an aureate katana of bright flames emanating from its edge. It is associated with Boethia, the Daedric prince of plots. But like many Daedric artifacts, their origins do not necessarily lie with its keeper. In the book Tamrielic Lore, written by Yagram Bagan, the last living Dwemer, he says this about Goldbrand. The magical sword is a complete mystery. Thieves tell tales about its golden make and how it was actually forged by ancient dragons of the north. Their tales claim that it was given to a great knight who was sworn to protect the dragons. The sword lends its wielder the ability to do fire damage on an enemy. Goldbrand has not been cited in recent history and is said to be awaiting a worthy hero. Interestingly, this source posits that it was made by ancient dragons of the north, which I think implies it was made in Atmora, far to the north where the dragon cult ruled and came from. Yet it could also refer to Skyrim, in a time when the dragons ruled in the late Merethic era. Certain legends say that the dragons bestowed Goldbrand upon the Nordic warrior Sivdir, an ancient ancestor of the modern-day Battleborn clan of Whiterun. He could be the great knight sworn to protect the dragons that is mentioned in the Tamrielic Lore book, though in this case it would be using anachronistic terminology. We must imagine this Sivdir as a devotee of the dragon cult, a Templar of sorts. Possibly he was even one who fought in the Dragon Wars on the side of Alduin and the Dragon Priests. We can only really speculate. However, using several sources in combination, we can come up with an estimate of time in which the reign of the dragons prospered in Skyrim, sometime between ME 500 and ME 100. Merethic era dates work like BC, counting in years before the First Era. This means that Goldbrand was created sometime between 4,500 and 5,000 years ago. It is a truly ancient artifact, but what I find most curious is that it was forged in the distinct style of the Akaviri that would presumably have been unknown to Tamriel at the time. Then again, we know that there were dragons of both Akavir and Atmora, who's to say there was no cross-cultural pollination or sharing of forging techniques. They can fly overseas after all. I imagine anyways the forging to be a more poetic description of a blade that was formed with the mighty thumb of the dragons. You know, considering the lack of opposable thumbs and all that, it makes forging in the traditional sense difficult. Irrespective of its curious origins, Goldbrand ended up in the possession of the Daedric prince Boethia, and in recent history the blade has been tightly associated with the dark warrior god, Deceiver of Nations. In Morrowind, Goldbrand was given to the Nerevarine by Boethia for helping rebuild his shrine, and in Oblivion, the hero of Kvatch was awarded Goldbrand for being victorious in the Tournament of 10 Bloods. These are both mighty heroes, yet both are unfaced by the opaqueness of history. Yet what you might find interesting is that there is a rumor that a very influential and important character on the world stage once wielded the mighty Goldbrand. From the book The Great War, the Battle of the Red Ring section. Titus II led the assault from the north, personally capturing Lord Narafin. It is rumoured the Emperor wielded the famed sword Goldbrand, although this has never been officially confirmed by the Imperial government. The Elder Scrolls legends, as recalled by the Moth Priest Kellan, tell of a forgotten hero who fought the Dremora Reeve and claimed it after defeating him, wielding Goldbrand while in the disguise of Titus Mede II at the Battle of the Red Ring. I'm not a huge fan of this version. I think it's far more badass for Titus Mede II himself to have been the one slaying Aldmeri Dominion soldiers with a flaming katana. But either way, by the time of Skyrim, Goldbrand had vanished from his possession. Oranya's journal contains the thoughts of an Imperial historian who was researching the enigmatic blade, and she believed that after the battle, Mede II, or one of his agents, had it returned to the tomb of the one said to have originally possessed the blade, Sivdir, an ancient Nord warrior who fought in defense of the dragons. And there, in Sivdir's respite, is where Goldbrand is said to reside. Mede II was said to have felt that he lacked the right to claim the blade, and that it should return to the one who it was first entrusted. I suppose this could be possible, though it appears unclear to me how Titus or his agent would have had access to the tomb at Sivdo's respite, as it provides a challenging task to open. We must use Aranya's research notes to gain access. Her deciphered inscriptions speak of 2 keys needed for access to Sivdo's tomb. The inscriptions relate to 2 ancient relics. The first is Sivdo's amulet, inscribed with the symbols of his rank and other honorifics. The second is the skull of Sivdo's betrayer and lifelong enemy, Magrathi. Sivdo, never having exacted revenge in his time, now calls out to us from the beyond to defile his enemy's resting place and place the skull near his sacred burial chamber as a sort of trophy. Morbid, but not uncommon for the period. Her research notes pinpoint the Battleborn clan as the inheritor of Sivdo's amulet and Magrathi as an influential priest of the dragon cult who had slain Sivdo's brother over rightful ownership of a silver mine. Shroudhearth Barrow is the place where Magrathi now lies. With the Boethia's cultists dispatched, and with both the skull of Magrathi and Sivdo's amulet, we can enter the central chamber and claim Goldbrand as our own. It is such an iconic, glorious weapon, a golden katana shrouded in flame, and I can see why Boethia, with her might makes right philosophy, would find such an appeal in this weapon of war. For Boethia, battle is seen as a blessing, the ultimate trial of will and skill. May her followers cut themselves into better shapes. Speaking of Boethia and swords, well, every sword needs a swordsman, and there is no greater swordsman than Fa-Nuit-Hen, scion of Boethia, multiplier of motions known, the demi-prince of Maelstrom. I shall let Fa-Nuit-Hen explain what a demi-prince is. What makes a prince a prince? A broad and well-defined sphere of influence that enables clarity of purpose and focused expression of will. My sphere of influence is well-defined but not particularly broad, so I am a mere demi-prince, an entity of power and consequence far outstripping that of any mortal, but trivial compared to the greater princes. I have ambitions, of course, like every Arda, but I keep them within my sphere, lest I suffer the same fate as you-know-who. Fa-Nuit-Hen, when asked about his motions, his swordcraft, he replies with this: "The answer to your question is inherent in my title, the multiplier of motions known. Every martial discipline is founded upon its own set of basic moves which, once learned, form the bases of more elaborate moves. Across the planes, from mortals and immortals, I collect these known motions, cross-reference and synergize them to elaborate even further, and thus the motions known are multiplied. The results are incarnated in my barons, each of which represents the ultimate expression of a martial discipline, and that's where they come from. Fa-Nuit-Hen has created the barons of move like this, personifications of martial styles manifested by the collection of martial knowledge that Fa-Nuit-Hen has acquired across Mundus and Oblivion. He is without a doubt the most dangerous possible swordsman you could face. I have collected the known motions of every martial discipline in Nirn, all the way back to the prismatic vector dance of the Elnefey. But whoever I deal with, I always repay those I learn from with motions previously unknown to them, so the knowledge gets around. Slowed fencing, for example, has evolved a fascinating regimen they call welcoming the cut. Fa-Nuit-Hen and his barons of move like this were mentioned in the 36 lessons of Vivek, and Hen is even cited as a teacher of Vivek himself in both Blade and the esoteric wisdoms of the world. Go to the land of the Indoril in 3 months' time, for that is when war comes. I return now to haunt the warriors who fell and still wonder why. But first, I show you this." Then the barons and the demi-prince joined together in a pillar of fighting styles terrible to behold, and they danced before the egg and its learning image. Look, little Vec, and find the face behind the splendor of my bladed carriage, for in it is delivered the unmixed conflict path, perfect in every way. What is its number? It is said the number is the number of birds that can nest in an ancient Tiberol tree. Less 3 grams of honest work, but Vivek in his later years found a better one, and so gave this secret to his people. "For I have crushed a world with my left hand," he will say, "but in my right hand is how it could have won against me. Love is under my will only." I'll let you chew on that and not derail the entire video with an exploration of the maddening esoterica that is the 36 lessons of Vivec, but the takeaway here is that swordsmanship is such a strong concept in the Elder Scrolls that there is in fact a demi-prince who embodies this sphere. And further still, there are other esoteric and symbolic interpretations of the sword and what wielding one means, but last thing, I'll quote you from the 36 lessons of Vivec. The true sword is able to cut chains of generations, which is to say, the creation myths of your enemies. I adore this quote, and it's why I love playing the warrior, poet, mystic swordsman, blade monk archetype so much. Of course, the Dunmer culture provides a wealth of esoteric sword lore, but arguably, there is nothing more esoteric than spirit swords. The spirit swords, or as they are named in the Yakutan tongue, Shehai, are the powerful weapons of the Ansai, the greatest of the ancient sword singers. All sword singers learn through their intense training and devotion to the gods of war and way of the sword, the forms of discipline that allow the creation of the spirit sword. This is a simple form of magic or mind mastery, whereby an image of a sword is formed from pure thought. The sword singer forms the sword by concentrating, and it takes shape in his hand. It is usually a pale thing of light, misty and insubstantial, a thing of beauty perhaps, or a symbol of devotion to the way and the gods, but no weapon. However, the Ansai of the highest level and sensitivity, and those with talent in magic, can in times of stress form a spirit sword, a Shehai that is far more than light and air. It is an unstoppable weapon of great might, a weapon that can never be taken from the owner without also taking his mind. For the Redguards of today, this art is often thought lost knowledge, mere fairy tales even, but in the interregnum of the Second Era, the Redguard swordmaster Sai-Sahan, captain of the Dragon Guard, while on an expedition in the Reach, harnessed the ancient teachings of Red Eagle, focusing on what he loved most, his companion, Lyris Titanborn. Love was the path. Love is under my will only. Through this method, Sai-Sahan was able to successfully summon his Shehai, a powerful blade of pure spirit and will. This means that there is hope for the sword singers to return in the modern day. The tradition is not entirely lost. Yakutan culture, that is the ancient Redguard culture, is rich with sword lore. I'd implore you to check out our recent video on the Elder Scrolls 6, which goes into broader details, but it's funny how Tamriel seems to pale in swordsmanship and bladecraft when compared to the cultures of Eastern Akavir and Western Yakuta. Even the most celebrated warriors of Tamriel, such as Gaiden Shinji, the first arena blade master, was a Redguard only a few centuries removed from Yakutan arrival in Tamriel. The best techniques are passed on by the survivors. Yakuta particularly was home to many gods and mythology that directly attributes swordsmanship and swords as a central characteristic. For example, we have Diagna, the Orichalc god of the sideways blade, who so crashed his fist against the Hunding Gong, causing swords to fall from the Orichalc tower like needles from a dry pine. These swords would be the weapons for the Yakutans in the fight against the sinistral elves of that land. We also have Leki, the saint of the spirit sword and goddess of aberrant swordsmanship. She introduced the ephemeral feint technique. But most important to discuss right now, there is also the war god Onsi, the Boneshaver. He is said to have taught mankind how to pull their knives into swords. Essentially, he is credited with showing the Yakutans how to make swords. We can actually cross paths with some Redguard remnant agents in Skyrim and help them thwart the Thalmor and Ismail, a traitorous noble. The spoils are yours, and Ismail was wielding a beautiful blade named Boneshaver. Rumors suggest that this fine sword was gifted to the Regarda, the warrior waves of the Yakutans, by Onsi the Boneshaver himself. After all, the sword shares his name. Boneshaver is a well-made scimitar with an ornate dragon head at its hilt, and each strike thins the blood, causing additional bleeding for your foes. If you're down to get a little cuckoo, there is some extra cool esoteric lore about the sword singers, though it's not strictly canon, as it was written by Michael Kirkbride after his tenure at Bethesda. Either way, it's very interesting. In the piece, Lord Vivec's sword meeting with Cyrus the Restless, we have Cyrus, the hero of the Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, and Vivec, the living warrior poet god of the Dunmer, in a confrontation. During their conversation, anticipating a deadly encounter, Cyrus threatens to use their Pankratosword, an ancient and forbidden technique that was so powerful it is claimed to be responsible for the destruction of Yakuta itself. As should this, Cyrus said, moving to the Pankratosword. Vivek paused longer, and then he laughed out loud. You would not. I say again, test me. You would destroy the home of your ancestors even more, and in the fashion that they had done, which is now forbidden in your hands? Cyrus didn't move from his stance. All for an opal which you could never thereafter spend. You would be finished, Cyrus said, and I would be rid of the one who shamed me, so why wouldn't I? You shouldn't have sent your saints to me, Ansu Gurlet. I'm not much like them at all. Cut the Atmos and you die too. What? The barons of move like this didn't teach you a counter-move to this? Cyrus said. Oh wait, they wouldn't have. The Pankratosword is stricken from the record. Vivek laughed again. He was delighted. He said, The things they said about you were true, Redguard, whether you wish to believe it or not. Vivek bowed his head. I make way, he said. I drop my sword. And the Demon King did, though it hovered a few inches from the ground. Vivek continued. And thus we come to stalemate, for I am unarmed, and you cannot— No, Cyrus said, moving his sword to Vivek's throat. You overestimate my Redguard honor, boy. Different rules apply to gods and demons and mad shapers. And you, Ansu Gurlet, you're all three. I should kiss you, Vivek smiled. The jewel do better, Cyrus said. Thank you very much. Summon it, send it to my ship, and we're done. This is what you ransom for your shame, Vivek said, chiding, the opal of Nogru floating out from within the temple. It flew off south and east. You're easily bought. Cyrus turned to go, but Vivek stopped him, saying, And I so wanted to see the Pankratosword, and so believed you eyed enough to bring its ruin on us both. What stopped you, Surahun? Old advice, Cyrus said, and he pointed his saber to Vivek's face and its two colors. And you're wearing it, sure enough. At the apex of the temple's upper reaches, Cyrus turned back, calling to Vivek. Ink and gold, my lord, he said, and the general mystery of dangerous men, you see. Well met, Tribune, and farewell. He left the Ansu Gurlet forever. And that's how the story goes, with a duel that was not a duel, and with a story that wasn't true. Cyrus, you see, never knew how to actually use the Pankratosword, only how to hold it at threat. After all, its use was forbidden, and thus held in no stone at all after the fall of old Yakuta. The tale credits use of the Pankratosword with the destruction of the entire continent of Yakuta, a swordslinger move so powerful it could split atoms. A nuke sword, if you will. It's pretty out there, but it is awesome, and I love anything to do with Vivek. This encounter is just so cool, so I just had to share it. Vivek is probably my favorite god, or saint, depending on who you ask. The reclamations have taken their place at the forefront of the Dunmeri faith once again. Mufala, once framed as the anticipation of the greater Vivek, has now been vindicated and reclaimed her place. It would be almost impossible for me to talk about Skyrim Sword Lore without mentioning one of my personal favorites, the Ebony Blade. It has corrupted and perverted the desires of great men and women, yet its power is without equal, to kill while your victim smiles at you. Only a Daedra most foul could have concocted such a malevolent and twisted weapon, but it appears that all who wield it end up with the crazed eyes of those wild men who roam the hills chattering with rabbits. Mufala is the Daedric prince of murder, lies, deception, sex, and secrets. Other names include the Spinner, the Spider Queen, Black Hands Mufala, and in the case most relevant to us, the Whispering Lady.
Been hearing some strange tales of the Jarl's children. Say the one's turning wicked, and the others have an ill-favored look to them.
Yes, my youngest son. He's a dark child. I don't know what to do with him. He was always a quiet lad. But lately, something has changed. He's become brooding, violent. He won't say a word to me, but I don't know how I upset him. If you could speak to him, draw out the truth, I would be immensely grateful.
Your father said to speak to you.
So, the disgusting pig sent you to bother me. One day, I'll tear his face apart so he can leave me alone. My father doesn't know anything about me. But I know about him, and about the war. more than he might think.
What sort of things?
I know that he still worships Talos, that he hates the Thalmor almost as much as the Stormcloaks do, that he worries about being chased from Whiterun, that I don't have the same mother as my brother and sister.
How do you know these things?
The castle is old. Lots of places nobody's been in a long while. Places where you can overhear things, see things. And the Whispering Lady.
Who's the Whispering Lady?
She won't tell me her name. I've gotten good at listening to keyholes. At the door in the basement, I hear her talking to me. I thought I was caught, but she started telling me even more secrets. But I can't open the door.
Where is this door?
In the basement. Trust me, you'll see it. I bet she'll talk to you too.
I am Mephala, the Lady of Whisper. I tug at the web of connections between mortals. Love, hatred, loyalty, betrayal. First, you must open this door. A piece of my power has been locked away behind it, and even my eyes cannot see past the seals. I'd much rather it be in the hands of an ambitious and talented person, such as yourself.
We inquire with Nelkir about the door, pickpocket a key from the court wizard, and finally we have access to the hidden room in which lies a sword and a book which describes the futile efforts of Balgruuf and Farengar to melt the sword in the hottest fires of the Skyforge. They fear its power, fear this blade coming into the hands of their enemies. We have no such fear.
Excellent work. Now, I trust you're sharp enough to see that the sword doesn't match the description of the Ebony Blade you may know. It has languished too long outside the winds of alliance and betrayal. To return to its past glory, it must first drink the blood of deceit. Your world is admirably steeped in lies and inclinations. My blade is a darling leech that feeds on deceptions and nourishes its master. Seek out those closest to you. The final pluck of their misguided heartstrings will accompany my blade in a song of your grandeur. The blade will feed on the ire of Tamriel, bathe in your infamy, feel the weight of their loathing, and my power will course through it once more.
The Ebony Blade absorbs the life force of our foes, feeding our own power, and as we nourish the blade with the blood of the betrayed, so does its effects grow more potent.
Their tears shine the ebony to a sharpest gleam.
The Ebony Blade is not a sword for the noble, nor is association with Mephala for that matter. Daedric artifacts have been known to manifest in different ways throughout time. Before it has appeared as a one-handed katana with the additional ability of silence, which means those struck cannot use the flow of magicka to conjure spells. But without question, I think aesthetically, the Ebony Blade of Skyrim is by far the coolest, the perfect weapon for a member of the Morag Tong, the cult of assassins who so worship the web spinner and kill in her honor. I spoke earlier of how Vivec was tightly associated with Mephala, her being considered an anticipation of him in the tribunal faith. The Dunmer do not envision Lord Vivec as a creature of murder, sex, and secrets. Rather, they conceive of Lord Vivec as benevolent king, guardian warrior, poet, artist. But at the same time, unconsciously, they accept the notions of darker, hidden currents beneath Vivek's benevolent aspects. For example, one of the most striking persistent myths associated with Vivek is the story that Vivek conspired with his co-rulers Almalexia and Sotha Sil in the murder of Lord Nerevar, the greatest of Dunmer heroes and generals. The story is derived from Ashlander oral tradition and is flatly contradicted by all temple traditions. Nonetheless, the tale is firmly established in the Dunmer imagination, as if to say, of course Vivek would never have conspired to murder Lord Nerevar, but it happened so long ago, who can know the truth? In the 36 lessons of Vivek, there are secret messages which spell out foul murder, pointing to an admission of guilt regarding the murder of Lord Nerevar. Nerevar is without a doubt one of the most important and central figures in Morrowind's history, and also the owner of one of the most exotic-looking swords. Trueflame, the Blade of Nerevar. There is no mistaking this unique sword for any other. Its form is outlandish and fantastical, ornate and audacious even, curiously traits that I would not traditionally associate with its creators. The creation of this blade, along with its twin Hopesfire, is actually rather sweet. No malevolent gods or souls of monsters, the twin blades Trueflame and Hopesfire were originally wedding gifts. Lord Nerevar was the leader of the Chimer people during the Nordic occupation of Morrowind, then known as Resdayn. Nerevar made an alliance with Dwarf King Dumak, who led the Dwemer, and together they drove out the Nords and formed the First Council. Nerevar married Indoral Almalexia, and for a wedding gift, Dumak commissioned 2 swords to be made and presented these Dwemeri crafts in celebration of their bond. Nerevar wielded Trueflame, and Almalexia wielded Hopesfire. Nerevar's blade is a technical marvel, a blade that ignites with pyroil tar, an eternal flame and beacon for the Velothi. Hopesfire, contrary to its name, ignites with crackling lightning and electrifies those it strikes. The Dwemer alliance could never last forever, and when the profane use of the Heart of Lorkhan was discovered by Nerevar, the 2 races went to war. Nerevar and Dumak died in battle, at least that is one of the several stories about the controversial Battle of Red Mountain, but in any case, Trueflame was broken and lost. Thousands of years later, the true Nerevarine emerged, that is, the reincarnation of Nerevar, and he reforged Trueflame with the help of Almalexia, but she had an ulterior motive. In a rather tragic but poetic turn of events, the Nerevarine, wielding Trueflame, would face down Almalexia, wielding Hopesfire, as she tried to kill the Nerevarine after having killed Sotha Sil herself already. Losing one's godlike powers to become mortal again, that drives a girl like her mad. Rumours state that the Nerevarine left Tamriel for Akavir, but the swords Trueflame and Hopesfire must have left his possession before then, because they can be found on the Isle of Solstheim at the time of Skyrim. A small cult of the Tribunal faithful has hidden themselves on that frigid isle as they await the return of their gods. Delusional perhaps, but after all they are stalwart zealots of the temple. The hands of Almalexia are counted among their ranks, the most skilled warriors of the Tribunal temple, selected as private guards for Almalexia herself, or at least they were. Kenro Hlan was one of their number, and he had in his possession an inert Trueflame, which he was trying to reignite in Falbathars. We have a violent confrontation and claim the weapon as our own, but we can endeavour to restore the Falbathar's forge and use the pyroil tar to once more reignite the Trueflame. Our Dragonborn here, an Ashlander who joined House Redoran, Zalaku, is an adherent of the true gods. The reclamations will endure old falsehoods no longer. We carve our way through these puppets of pretenders and recover Hopesfire, along with many other treasures from their armory. In Skyrim, we can dual-wield these beautiful twin blades as we spin death through our enemies. But while still on the Isle of Solstheim, there is another pair of twin blades with powerful enchantments and an interesting story. The northern seas of Tamriel were once in ages past terrorized by the King of Ghosts, the infamous pirate Haknir Deathbrand. For Garrick Windrime, ship's quartermaster, it was unthinkable. His grandfather had served under Haknir nigh on 60 years before, and even then he was a legend among pirates of the north. The King of Ghosts, they called him, as eternal and pitiless as the sea he sailed. To Garrick, who had seen him charge into battle, clad in armour of gleaming Stalrim like the kings of old, his twin swords scything men like grass, Haknir was practically a god. But none feared Haknir more than his own crew. They knew his rages, his fits of madness, how he delighted in torture and murder for its own sake. And there were even darker rumors. Some said he fed upon the blood and souls of those he killed to extend his unnatural life. Some thought him a Daedra loosed upon the mortal world, and others said he owed his life and power, his armor and swords, to a pact with Dagon, Prince of Destruction. And the seal of that pact was the terrible wound that scarred his face, never to heal, the Deathbrand, which no man could look upon without flinching. This terrible pirate king, Hackney Deathbrand, despite his legend and long life, was coming to an end. He was dying. "You wish to know who will be my successor, and how my share of the treasure shall be divided?" That was the question, but even so there were murmurs of protest. Hackney cut them off. "All these years I have looked for one who was worthy to take my place, or strong enough to take it from me. None of you even comes close, and so none of you shall have it." He extended his hand. "In Dagon's name, I place a curse upon my armor and my swords, this ship and all it carries. Until the day when one of you can best me in combat, you shall not have a single coin." He looked up at them. "Be grateful I have left you with your lives." We can read the book Deathbrand and be led on a quest for treasure, a good old-fashioned treasure hunt, a long journey to find the hoard of Hackney Deathbrand. Our long journey takes us to several locations where we can claim the lost pieces of the Deathbrand armor and find our way to Gildenhall Barrow, filled with gold, jewelry, and valuables, and of course the long-dead remains of the Pirate King himself. As we take his sword, Bloodscythe, for our own, the King of Ghosts summons forth and tries to kill us, along with several spectres of his crew. We are the greater swordsman, and returns to dust the once mighty Hackney Deathbrand. Now we lay claim to his dual swords, Bloodscythe and Soulrender. These twin weapons are a devastating combo. Their enchantments only work in tandem. Bloodscythe absorbs the health of your foes and sunders their armor, leaving them open to fatal blows. No magic will save them either, for Soulrender absorbs their magical reserves and can dispel whatever arcane defenses they have cast, whether that be flesh spells, wards, cloaks, or invisibility. Together, these blades can mince even the hardiest of foes, the perfect weapon for a pirate king of the north, clad in an armor of ice. Stalrim is such a fascinating material, the enchanted ice of the ancient Nords used for burials, armor, and even weapons. But Stalrim by no means has the monopoly on cool ice weapons. In the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, we can help a fellow by the name of Valis Odil defend his farm from goblin raiders. He was once an adventurer and no longer needed his sword for himself, so he offers it to you as a reward if you made sure his son survived the ordeal. It is a rather inconspicuous quest, but the blade itself is anything but. Chillrend appears as a glass shortsword in form, but the malachite, which should be green, appears as an icy blue, and its sharp edge freezes the blood of your foes as you strike. This unique sword can also be acquired in Skyrim. The weapon is in the possession of the thief Mercer Frey, locked away in his basement. Perhaps its enchantments have only grown in power throughout the centuries, because this unique blue malachite not only inflicts a biting cold, but it can freeze an enemy, paralyzing them for a short duration, leaving your foes helpless as you plunge its razor edge into their gullet. A cold death indeed. But speaking of frostbite and doom, there is another weapon that can be acquired, a weapon of antiquity and far greater renown. The book Tamrielic Lore by Yeager and Bagan says this about the Iceblade of the Monarch. The Iceblade of the Monarch is truly one of Tamriel's most prized artifacts. Legend has it that the evil archmage Almion Kelmo enchanted the claymore of a great warrior with the soul of a frost monarch, a stronger form of the more common frost atronach. The warrior, Thurgnar Assi, was to play a part in the assassination of a great king in a far-off land and become the new leader. The assassination failed, and the Archmage was imprisoned. The Iceblade freezes all who feel its blade. The blade circulates from owner to owner, never settling in one place for long. The Iceblade has changed hands many times. In the late Third Era in Morrowind, it was in the possession of a Dark Elf sorcerer named Laren Torano, a worshipper of Molag Bal. By the Fourth Era, it had found its way into the hands of Holric Frostsword, who no doubt earned that title for his use of the blade. He ventured to Crovagna Cave to face down a terrible monster, the Web Mother. The arachnid proved too powerful for even him with the Iceblade, and so he fell to its venom. We, on the other hand, followed his trail and made short work of this vile creature, and claimed the sword as our own. The Ice Blade both inflicts frost damage and slows your foes, even a single nick sealing their fate as their reactions to subsequent strikes are inhibited. But I think most interesting and unique about this sword is the fact that it contains the soul of a Frost Monarch. Imagine if it was released. A soul trapped inside a sword is not that rare, I suppose. In fact, some swords are considered almost sentient because of the power that lurks inside. Umbra is perhaps one of the most famous swords in the Elder Scrolls, a black sword of incredible power. On the face of it, it may just appear a high damage sword with a powerful soul trap enchantment. However, within lies a sentience that slowly begins to corrupt its wielder until they become synonymous with the sword they wield. One such example is the orc who became known as Umbra, and years later the Bosmer named Lenwyn came into the possession of the Umbra sword.
Umbra? That's a name I haven't heard in a while. And it's not one you should be using around Pell's Gate either. Before I go on, let's clear something up. Are you here asking about the sword or the person? Which is it?
The sword.
It's a powerful sword, no doubt about that. Jet black, got a wicked edge on it. And they say it can steal a man's soul. I know of at least one soul it stole. Lenwyn. She's the one who found the blasted thing. I suppose you want to hear about the person now.
Tell me about the person.
Who is Umbra? I can tell you who Umbra used to be. Lenwyn. She's my apprentice, or at least she was, until she found that sword. Never did say where it came from. She just showed up with it one day, said it was called Umbra. But she was different. She'd always been fair with a sword, but she began looking for fights, became bloodthirsty, and then started calling herself Umbra after the sword. Finally signed on with some mercenaries, but I hear that ended too. We haven't seen her in years.
In the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, Clavicus Vile, the Daedric Prince of Trickery and Bargains, asks you to retrieve the sword known as Umbra. A simple exchange, but one entirely devoid of context.
You will retrieve for me a sword, a very special sword. It contains the soul of Umbra, a hero I have had dealings with in the past. Bring the sword to me, and I'll reward you with my mask. You'll not find a better bargain, mortal. Begin your search in Pell's Gate.
Barbas, Clavicus Vile's dog companion, in actuality he is part of Vile's power, tries to convince you to not give the sword to Clavicus. Supposedly it's in his best interest. What the hero of Kvatch decided to do is not clear, but either way the sword would make its way back to Clavicus Vile soon after. But let's first look at the origins of this blade. Long ago, an ancient Reach witch named Nainrawea was commissioned by Clavicus Vile to create a powerful sword as a tool of mischief, one which would send souls to his realm. Nainra did as she was bid and created the powerful sword, but it was unstable, and so she convinced Clavicus Vile to imbue the sword with a piece of his own power. But this was a trick. The power festered into a sentience of its own, calling itself Umbra. Nainrawea was executed for this, but not before she hid the sword away. Clavicus Vile had been in pursuit of the blade ever since, desiring to recover that piece of his power. There are many more details than in what follows, all contained within the Elder Scrolls novels The Infernal City and Lord of Souls by Greg Keyes, but the summarized version is that Umbra found himself in Clavicus Vile's Oblivion realm, but managed to hide and cut away more of the prince's power for itself, transforming into the shape of a man with eyes like holes into nothing. Umbra did not want to be returned to the sword or Clavicus, and so when opportunity arose for escape, he took it, fusing his soul with a Dunmer named Vuhon, creating a new ingenium to pull a piece of Clavicus's realm free from oblivion. This was the floating city of Umbriel. Honestly, it's too much information to cover extensively here, but in the end, Umbriel was banished and Vile supposedly reclaimed the spirit of Umbra. Or so we thought. In Skyrim, we can adventure to a series of long-lost crypts known as Champion's Rest, once an ancient Nordic gladiatorial arena. By chance, an imperial treasure hunter named Cressitus fell down a hole in the mountains east of Shorestone and broke both of his legs. He was destined for death in this ancient ruin, but in his dreams, he floated in a sea of black, with the Umbra sword calling out for him to claim it, and so he did, and his legs began to mysteriously heal. When I sleep, I hear the sword. It whispers to me, not with words, but with intent. It has a hunger, I can feel it. Of course, it seems silly that a weapon wouldn't hunger for lives when you think about it. Is that not their purpose? To free the soul from the living? Maybe none of this is real. I can walk again. I've set up a small camp here. I think it's the sword. It's helping me. It thirsts for souls, and it needs me to find them. Cressitus, like so many before him, had been corrupted by Umbra, and the blade's sentience consumed his own. We can encounter Umbra and its soul images and fight it to the death in this ancient arena. The man who was Cressitus has been slain, and Umbra belongs to us now. Though we are no fool, despite its power, we shall lock it away so its whispers may not corrupt us. All this darkness has me desiring the warmth of light, and so there is no better sword to see than the Dawnbreaker, forged in a holy light that immolates the prince's foes. Dawnbreaker is the creation of the Daedric prince Meridia, the Radiant One. While she may be a Daedric prince, with her realm of the coloured rooms and her Auroran Daedra, Meridia was once counted amongst the Magnagi, the followers of Magnus. Known then as Merid Nunda, she was one of the 9 coruscations who turned away from Magnus as he fled Mundus, creating the whole that is the sun. While we should not mistake Meridia as a deity of all holy and good, her sphere does more so align with those connotations. The sword Dawnbreaker was made to burn away corruption and false life. The Bright Lady reserves a particular hatred of the undead, the foul and the rotten. While adventuring in Skyrim, you may come across this strangely shaped object, a Magna Geode.
A new hand touches the beacon. Listen, hear me and obey. A foul darkness has seeped into my temple. A darkness that you will destroy. Return my beacon to Mount Kilcreath, and I will make you the instrument of my cleansing light.
And if you so listen to the commands of the Glister Witch, you will slay the risen dead of Malkoran, a necromancer who has defiled her temple. Once the temple has been cleansed and Meridia's light restored, you are rewarded with Dawnbreaker, a powerful sword and bane of the undead and corrupt. It burns away any who meet its holy fire, but as it slays the undead, fiery explosions emanate, destroying or turning nearby undead. It is the perfect sword for a holy Templar. In ages past, it has been used by the Golden Knight, her champion, whose real name was Darian Gautier. He wielded Dawnbreaker as he helped the Vestige thwart the Daedric triad of Clavicus Vile, Nocturnal, and Mephala, preventing them from harnessing the power of the Crystal Tower. After Nocturnal had corrupted the blade and turned it to Duskbringer, Darian sacrificed himself to restore the light of Meridia, giving his life to return Dawnbreaker. This weapon we now wield has quite a legacy, but it certainly isn't the only holy blade with a history. I would be remiss to forget Chyrsamere, dubbed the Paladin's Blade. The Paladin's Blade is an ancient claymore with offensive capabilities surpassed only by its own defenses. It lends the wielder health, protects him or her from fire, and reflects any spells cast against the wielder back to the caster. Seldom has Chyrsamere been wielded by any bladesman for any length of time, for it chooses not to favour one champion. In Skyrim, we can explore the ruin known as Forelhost and encounter the Lost Paladin, a spectral being who wields this blade, putting the soul to rest and taking the weapon as our own. It is a truly fantastic blade for any two-handed warrior. It offers spell absorption, fire resistance, and it regenerates the user's health even in the midst of combat, and it also never runs out of charge. But from where did this blade originally come? Master Malkhest, Hierophant and Custodian of the Infinite Archive, Hermaeus Mora's Endless Library, has this to say about the Paladin's Blade. A two-handed blade, or claymore, forged late in the Merethic era by a Breton swordsmith of some renown by the name of Asteri Bedel. She was an accomplished blacksmith, and she delighted in using the techniques of both men and mer in crafting her wares. Of this I am certain, for within the very heart of the blade itself lies her maker's mark, a mage's knot that harkens back to the earliest days of Brettonic culture. Much of the journey from well-crafted but mortal blade to the Sword of Heroes lies beyond the bounds of the Infinite Archive. Certainly it was influenced by the magic of Breton society's elven forebearers, gaining enchantments as it was passed from hand to hand. It fought in the wars to secure Clan Direni's role as Lords of High Rock and was present at the first sacking of Orsinium. Its defensive enchantments were sharpened and retooled to protect its bearer in a protracted siege of the Fell Thunder clan of giants in Rivenspire, and it played a small but important role in the Battle of Glenumbria Moors. By Malkest's account, Chyrsamere is over 4,500 years old by the time of Skyrim, and it has seen use by many heroes of history and shed blood in many famous battles, an incredible weapon perfect for smiting evil. Evil such as the Pale Lady. With Chyrsamere in tow, we explore the northern, frostbitten regions of Skyrim, unwelcoming to our Dragonborn here, who was born amongst the ash-darkened Foyardas of Morrowind. For generations, the people of Morthal have told whispered tales of the Pale Lady, a ghostly woman who wanders the northern marshes, forever seeking her lost daughter. Some say she steals children who wander astray, others that her sobbing wails strike dead all those who hear it. But behind these tales may lie a kernel of truth. For ancient records speak of Omriel, a mysterious figure Ysgramor's heirs battled for decades and finally sealed away. Hidden within Frostmere Crypt is revealed to be the place that the Pale Lady, Omriel, is trapped, with ancient Nordic stones sealing her within her glade. The most probable explanation for this Omriel is that she was a snow elf of the late Morethic era who in vengeance battled the Nords as a haunting spectre, punishment for their extermination of her race. The Pale Blade was an ancient sword used to seal the spectral snow elf and keep her from waking, but some enterprising bandits found the crypt and began digging tunnels. The journal of Isa Blackthorn tells us more. Night shift woke me to say they'd hit something big. Kier, Regier and I went down to take a look. It's huge, like a whole forest was just swallowed up by the earth, with a big old monument out in the center. Kier took the sword from it as a trophy, proof his whole plan was finally paying off. For once, he might be right. Regier's been having nightmares over the past few days. He keeps muttering about a Pale Lady, one of those swamp women who steal children away at night, I think. To think some fool story could turn the toughest bandit I know into a cowering kitten, frightened of his own shadow. I'm just glad none of the others see him like this. It's getting worse. Regier can barely sleep at all now, and whenever he dozes off, he wakes up screaming. Woke the whole place last night. He says the Pale Lady is coming for us. She's down in the forest. We have to return the sword or she'll kill us all. Not a chance. The boss clings to that thing like he was born with it. I've told everyone Regier just has a fever, but this can't go on. I've pulled a few things together. I'll slip out tonight and never look back. We can come across this mess and fight our way through Frostmere Crypt and face down the Pale Lady ourselves. We can take the sword from Regier quickly and place the blade back on the pedestal, banishing Omriel, or rather we can destroy her ourselves and claim the Pale Blade as a trophy of our own. Skyrim is home to many cool secrets and hidden weapons of ancient glories. Solstheim for most of its history was ruled by the Nords, and the Isle is rife with ancient Nordic barrows, buried and forgotten, built thousands upon thousands of years ago. Naturally, many of these structures are uncovered millennia later, such as the Bloodskal Barrow, discovered year 10 of the 4th era by the mining operations of the East Empire Company in Ravenrock. However, this discovery was followed by disaster and covered up. From the lost journal of Gratian Corellius, a member of the East Empire Trading Company. Looks like the miners broke right through the wall of an old Nordic barrow. I've seen this sort of thing in Skyrim before. Damn Nords have barrows dotting the landscape, and almost none of them are ever marked on any maps. Looks like this barrow belongs to something called the Bloodskal clan. It's been an astonishing discovery. After exploring the large chamber beyond the drop-off, I was startled to find the strangest weapon I've ever laid eyes upon, sitting on a pedestal of sorts. The blade appears to be flawless, and it's emanating a faint, chilling glow. Bits of parchment I found about the chamber seem to call this the Bloodskal Blade. We come across one of Gratian's descendants 191 years later, and we are tasked with discovering his great-grandfather's fate.
A secret the East Empire Company swept under the rug 2 centuries ago. It killed my great-grandfather and left Ravenrock with a worthless and tainted mine.
We do discover the remains of Gratian and learn of his ill fate, a fading death brought upon by wounds taken during fights with awoken Draga, ancient undead stirred by the taking of the Bloodskal Blade. This is a truly miraculous weapon, a really cool design and an exceptionally exotic feature. As you strike in a certain way with a particular might, it unleashes a red wave of energy. This blade is not only an ancient heirloom of the Bloodskal clan, but it also functions as a key. Its beam beams of energy are able to manipulate the magical seals of the Great Door, which protects the barrow itself. The ancient Nords were truly remarkable masons, and the clever men exceptional with their enchantments. We use the Bloodskal Blade to open the barrow and continue our exploration. As we walk these ancient halls, we eventually come across an undead priest, Zakrisos, guarding a word wall which contains one part of the phrase which makes up the full power of the dragon aspect shout. We also discover a black book, a terrible artifact of Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of forbidden knowledge. Dragged into Apocrypha, we experience the horrid, inky seas which lap at great structures made of thousands of tomes, ensnared by tentacles and guarded by the sickening creatures of the Tide King. The last Dragonborn has many encounters with Hermaeus Mora, and the storyline introduces us to Miraak, the first Dragonborn, champion of Hermaeus Mora, hungering for his own power and return to Tamriel.
He has served me long and well, but he grows restless under my guidance. His desire to return to your world will spread my influence more widely, but it will also set him free from my direct control. It may be time to replace him with a more loyal servant. One who still appreciates the gifts that I have to offer.
At the climax of the questline, the first Dragonborn faces down the last, and an epic battle of dragons, thum, and martial might ensues. Miraak himself wields a strange sword, the Firstblade, Miraak's sword, a blade of writhing tentacles that lash out as it strikes, each hit leeching stamina from its foes. Its form is as fluid as the Daedric prince who created it. It is potentially one of the most powerful swords in terms of raw damage, and no doubt it is one of the most alien designs in all of Skyrim. Unfortunately, the details of this blade are as mysterious as Hermaeus Mora himself. Other than its undeniable association with the Demon of Knowledge, there is not much that can be said of the weapon. Miraak's staff and robes also bear enchantments that can release the tentacled grasp of Mora, but neither looks as consumed and utterly horrible as the sword that he wields. Once Miraak is defeated, we can take the Firstblade as our own and take our place as the champion of Hermaeus Mora. This, perhaps, is the dark fate of the last Dragonborn.
Miraak harbored fantasies of rebellion against me. Learn from his example. Serve me faithfully, and you will continue to be richly rewarded.
The Swords of Skyrim have so much awesome lore, blades with epic tales and disturbing origins, souls of greater Daedra, blood-reeking weapons that can change with the time of day, swords wielded by gods, some holy, some sinister. There is so much variety, unique armaments for hundreds of possible characters. Let me know, which Sword of Skyrim is your favorite? Thank you so much for watching the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed the journey. It's been a blast adventuring through Skyrim, collecting swords and telling their tales. Thanks again. My name is Scott from Fudge Muppet, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.